Greetings, people. This is Paul at Greenshire Homestead. We're going to talk about starting seeds. I'm very sorry. This is all I could find left over from my old the way I used to start seeds. These are those individual seed containers, and then it comes up with a black tray, and then the clear plastic dome. I think you're all pretty familiar with that. I think pretty much everybody's seen those. They do work well. I don't use them anymore, and I'll explain why. I'm going to do 3 videos on this. I'm going to do a video on starting seeds in this particular way. I'm going to do a video on starting seeds the way I do now, and I'm going to do a video on the proper lighting and how to get proper light onto your seeds for much less money than it would cost to buy grow lights. I do have a trick I'll talk to you about. It works extremely well. These seed packet or containers here, if I remember right, there'd be 18 of them, 9 on each side, so that would give you 72 plants out of just this one little container, which is a pretty good ratio. I mean, that's not bad if all of your seeds germinated and came up properly and everything was good and healthy. You'd have 72 plants out of just this one container. That's fantastic. For those of you that live in very tight residential areas, condominiums, or apartments that are not going to grow things on a large scale, this is a very good way of doing things. Very good way of doing things. I did this for about 20 years, and then that's why it's been about 12 years since I did that. That's why this is all I could find. Now, the other thing that will usually come with that kit that they want you to buy is the soilless starter mix. It is important to use the soilless mix because the soilless mix is sterile. It doesn't have fungus and bacteria in it, and it's also not going to contain any weed seed. Most of you aren't going to be able to identify the difference between the seedling and a weed, so you don't want the weeds growing up with your seedlings and then not sure which one to eliminate. So get the soilless mix. It usually comes in an 8-quart bag, which is going to be about enough for you to do one of these trays full of the individual cells. But for those of you that are going to grow on a larger scale, same thing here. I use the Coco Loco. This is a very large bag, 52 quarts, and I get this for about 25 bucks. So this is how much I used last year. This is what's left. So it goes a long way. Does a very good job, and you can get a lot done for a very reasonable amount of money. This stuff it comes damp in the bag. It's pretty damp. You can see it's coconut hull is what it is, and then it's got some perlite in it. Very, very nice stuff to work with. And you do need to get it wetter than it is in the bag. It's not. It comes very lightly damp, but you need it heavy damp. You're going to want the soil to be like you would if you absorbed water in a sponge and then held the sponge up and it wouldn't drip anymore, where you wring it out some to where the sponge suspended in the air is no longer dripping, but if you went to wring it out, more water would come out. That's what you want this to be like. So if you held up a clump of soil lightly, I'm not squeezing that at all, I'm just holding it, and it wasn't dripping, but then I did squeeze it and it did drip water, that's what you want. Okay, that's a perfect consistency for starting seeds. So what I do is I'd get a 5-gallon bucket. I've got all kinds of them. I'd get one of my 5-gallon buckets under here, and I'd fill it up with several handfuls of this soilless mix, and then I'd take a little bit of water. I fill a couple of these up with water a few days before I'm going to plant, and then stick them in the sun. Let them get nice and warm, because it's important that the soil be warm when you're starting your seeds. You want this water in here very, very warm. And then you would just add some to the soilless mix in the bucket. Add it a little at a time, and then with your hands just mix it up, mix it up, mix it up until you have that consistency. Just keep adding water and mixing it up until you have that consistency where when you hold it up, it's all wet and it holds together, but if you were to squeeze it, water would drip out. So once you have that, then of course you're going to fill your trays. And after you get some in there, shake it around a little bit. So all 4 cells in each individual container are full. And once you got them all full, just tamp them down just a little bit. Just a little bit. And then you're ready to start putting your seeds in. Now on the back of your seed packet, it's going to tell you, this is a tomato, and it says right on there, sow a 1/4 inch deep. So your tomato seed is going to need to be down 1/4 inch below the surface of the soil. This particular thing here, this is a basil. Now on the back here it says plant seeds just beneath the surface of the soil. So because we're going to plant that one just beneath the surface of the soil, this is the one we're going to put the basil in. We'll know that because we've already put a sticker on there and written basil on the sticker. So we know that all 4 of these are going to be basil. If I'm only going to grow 2 basil, then these 2 over here will be basil, and these 2 over here might be, impatiens or a flower or some other vegetable. But you want to make sure that you've labeled so that you know what is in each of these cells. That does become important. I know you think you'll remember, but you won't. Every single year I didn't label. I'd always, what the heck was that? And then, especially if you're going 2 types of tomatoes, you might have Amish paste over here and you have a purple ball over here, and you need to know because you're not going to be able to tell one tomato plant from another when they're seedlings. So I know this is going to be my basil, and I know it's got to be planted just below the surface. So I'm going to tamp this down a little more, and then I'm going to add a little more potting mix. Tamp that down. Then I'm going to put my basil seed in there, and I would put 3 seeds in each one. I'm not going to do that because it's January and I don't want to start my seeds yet. But so I would just pour a pile into my hands, pour some of that into my hand, and then I would just take individual ones and put 3 in each cell. Make sure you move them, have like a pencil or a pair of tweezers or something where you can move them around a little bit. You don't want the seeds touching. You want a little bit of room between them. And then you can just pour the remainder, back into the packet. And then with the tomato, do the same thing. I pour some tomato and then put the different tomatoes in there. Okay, now I've got my basil in here, and I got my tomato in here. My basil just needs to be just below the surface. So I'm just going to get a little bit, go back over it, like such. I'm going to smooth that out, just kind of make sure it's covering the entire surface of that individual area. And then I'm going to tamp it down. Not pushing down real hard, just very lightly, enough to make sure that seed has good soil contact. Now my tomatoes are in there 1/4 inch, but I'm gonna push them down just a little bit. They need to be 1/4 inch down, so I'm gonna go through here and push them all down just a little bit. And now on the side of my pot there, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's about 1/4 inch. Now I come back, fill them all up. And I'm going to lightly tamp those down. Just lightly. Not real hard. Okay. Now I have basil here, and I've got tomato here, and the soil is already damp. Okay, so I don't need to water, but I do want to mist it. So I'm going to take my mister, and I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to mist the surface of the soil. We do not, when they're at the age of a seedling, before they become a seedling, when the weed is, when the seed is still down in there, we don't want to use any kind of watering can, because the water's going to come out fast enough that it's going to cause all this soil to shift. With the mister, the spray bottle, it's not going to cause the soil to shift. It's just going to get it wet. But even a little, I feel silly holding this thing. A dude walking around with some little silly thing like this, yeah, I don't like it, and I know it looks funny, but these work. You can't water seedlings with something this size. You're going to get the seedlings all wet. You're going to disrupt the soil It's just going to be a mess. This is for something after I have my seedlings in here, and my tomatoes and my peppers are all this tall. See, then I can come back and water with this, because I'm not getting the leaves of the plants all wet. You don't want the leaves of the plants getting all wet. The disease and fungus, you're gonna have all kinds of problems. You want to keep them nice and dry. The plants themselves dry, the soil wet. That's our objective. So I've got my seed in there. I've spritzed that. All of these are planted, and all of them have been spritzed. Now I'm going to take the clear plastic dome and I'm going to put it on there. Okay. Once that clear plastic dome's on there, you're not really going to need to do any more misting, because that's the idea. That's all the dome does, is it keeps the moisture in. You're going to want to bang on it every now and then, because condensation is going to build up on it. Look in there, and you maybe even take it off and make sure everybody's still nice and damp. And if you see somebody needs a little more, just give them a little spritz. Put the dome back on there. Now, as soon as you start the first seedlings popping up, take the dome off. And I don't mean the first seedlings in every single tray, individual section. I mean, when you see the first bit of green coming up, where a seedling is starting to sprout, take that dome off and don't put it back on. Because what will happen is, with that dome on there and these seedlings coming up, there's a fungus called damping off, D-A-M-P-I-N-G. You can look it up online, damping off. And it's kind of like athlete's foot. It's a fungus, and it will kill the seedling. What you'll have happen, and many of you have maybe had this happen and didn't know what it was. I used to have it happen before I figured out what was going on. Because you feel like you're supposed to leave the dome on, because it's like a greenhouse, and plants are growing in a greenhouse. But it's not the same thing. That dome's just for the moisture. And that moisture will promote fungus and bacteria. So you need to get that off once the seedlings start coming up. But if you've had a seedling, maybe it was an inch tall, and all of a sudden it fell over, the next day it's just laying on its side, and there's a little tan or brownish looking spot right on the stem where it meets the soil. That's damping off. That fungus actually got in there and ate through that seedling, and it fell over like a tree, and it's dead, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if that does happen, you want to take a spoon and get all of the soil out of that particular cell, because that cell is going to have the damping off in it, and it's kind of like athlete's foot in a public shower. Once somebody gets it and they're in there walking around in that shower, they're spreading it to all the other people. So you want to eliminate that cell of the soil if you do have damping off appear. You'll know it because it'll just fall like a fell tree, and you'll see that dark spot right there at the soil line. So once your seedlings have all come up and everybody's growing real well, you can move to this, and you don't want to water it hard. Just a little bit of a drizzle. Don't get the tops of the plants and all that all wet and everything. Just the soil. And then once they're fully really getting growing like that, you might be able to use this on a tray this size. I think I'd rather stay with this one. This is more used for the 3.5 inch pots. But then of course, once your seedlings have grown and they're ready to be planted outside, you just take your individual cells. You can squeeze that just a little bit. You see when I squeeze that starts to even pop out. And once the seedling is growing and the roots are all in there, the root's going to hold that all together, and you should be able to just pull that all out in one fell swoop. Already have a hole dug and ready for the seedling. Put the seedling in the hole, backfill, give it some water because it's going to be a little bit stressed, and there you go. I'll do another video later too on hardening off your seedlings before you plant them out, but this is just a quick video on how to get the seedlings started in these individual trays. So this is Paul Greenshire. Hope that helped, gave you something to think about. Check out my other video on how to put lighting over the top of this. It's a very, very important thing, and I can show you how to do it cheaply and how to do it very efficiently. So you have a great day. We'll see you next time at Greenshire. Thanks for watching.